So the gospel today is from Luke 17:11 through 19.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. As Jesus continued his journey to Jerusalem, he traveled through Samaria and Galilee. As he was entering a village, 10 lepers met him. They stood at a distance from him and raised their voices, saying, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." And when he saw them, he said, "Go show yourselves to the priests." As they were going there, they were cleansed. And one of them realized he had been healed, returning, glorifying God in a loud voice, and he fell at the feet of Jesus and thanked him. He was a Samaritan. Jesus said in reply, 10 were cleansed, were they not? Where are the other 9? Has none but this foreigner returned to give thanks to God? Then he said to him, "Stand up and go. Your faith has saved you." The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Yeah, so 1 out of 10, right?
Right. That's bad odds.
So we have Jesus still, he's on a one-way trip to the cross. I mean, so there's a good part of Luke, it's his travel journey. You know, he's traveling toward Jerusalem. And then we have the whole passion narrative after, but Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem. And he travels through Samaria and Galilee. So he's kind of in the outskirts. He's not in major villages, but as he was entering, 10 lepers met him. They stood at a distance, so they're required to stand at a distance. Remember, I mentioned that earlier. And raised their voices, and again, they would have to because they talked like this. And so they were required because they were required to make sure that they alerted people so that they didn't get leprosy also. And if you were even close to them or had contact, then you would be required to separate yourself for, I think, 7 days, and then you'd have to show yourself to the priest, and they would inspect you to make sure you didn't have any leprosy yourself or sores. And what do they say? Kyrie eleison. Yeah, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. That's exactly what they're saying.
Is that what that means?
Yeah.
Kyrie eleison.
Have mercy on us. Have pity on us. Have mercy on us. And what does Jesus say? He doesn't heal them immediately. He says, "Go show yourself to the priest." That's what Leviticus required, right? And so they have to obey, right? They listen and they obey. But so they're he said, "Go show yourself to the priest." So they have this faith, this obedience though, this obedience of faith. They listen and they obey what Jesus had to say. And Jesus is doing what's right by Levitical law. So we have this one person. He realized he had been healed. Do you think the other people realized they were healed?
Yes.
I'm sure they did.
He didn't go back, though.
Yep, they didn't. And it's interesting because he's a Samaritan. And I thought about that. I said, well, this Samaritan couldn't go to the Jewish priest, could he? He wouldn't have been allowed. And so he would have had to gone to Samaritan, and like a Samaritan priest, whoever they had. Now they were separated. But he couldn't go to the temple. He couldn't go to the priests of the Jews. And so he's the one that actually goes back to Jesus. And I think there's this point. Naaman, he wasn't he wasn't from Israel, was he? So there's another similarity. And we see this throughout biblical history. It's people that are not part of God's chosen people are having greater faith than people that are within the covenant. And we have to be, as Christians, we need to be the ones that have great faith because we know the fullness of God's goodness. And so it's up to us to also, be people of great faith.
We don't know what the other 9 were.
No, we don't know what they were. They could have been Jews. They could have been Samaritans. They could have been. What's that?
They could have all been Samaritans.
They could have. The only reason I thought it might have been, it says priests in the plural. And that may be an implication that there's different priests, one for the Jewish, one for the Samaritan. That's what I kind of thought that too, but that's the only reason I thought. It doesn't give you that exactly. Go show yourself to the priests. And the fact that he was going through Samaria and Galilee, typically they would have been people that were following the Jewish, so Jesus that's where his family was from. It might have been a mixture. I mean, that's what would happen with these leprosy groups. It didn't really matter what your background was. You were in this colony, in a sense. If you're a leper, they would just kind of get grouped together and try to survive. I mean, because they had to beg from a distance. They had only each other at that point. But the one came back. He said, 10 were cleansed, were they not? Where are the other 9? Has none but this foreigner returned? And so when I thought of that too, and I said, well, if they were all foreigners, then he might have made, that might make a difference too. He said, has none but this foreigner returned to give thanks to God? And that's, when we talk about the Good Samaritan, now that would have, when he gave that parable about the Good Samaritan, that would have made the Jewish leaders furious. I mean, in a sense, because they hated the Samaritans. They hated the Samaritans so much because they broke away from the Jewish temple and created their own. And so they're half-breeds, is the way they looked at them. And they despised them. But he's saying this foreigner was the only one that did the right thing out of these 10. And he said, stand up and go. Your faith has saved you. And we want to make sure our faith saves us, right? So I guess there's faith that is saving and there's faith that's not saving, isn't there? I mean, in a sense.
So the other 9 never got saved.
We don't know that, but we know this one, his faith saved him. I mean, there's a lot of things we don't know. We can only kind of pull out what we do know. And
the other 9 did what they were told.
Yeah, they did what they were told.
So, I mean, it wasn't like you don't know for sure they weren't saved because they were being obedient to what
Jesus told them.
to do. But
Never gave thanks.
Yeah, but one sees the giver, right? And he also, when you look, he prostrated himself. He fell to the feet of Jesus and thanked him. So he recognized Jesus for who he was. And that's a gift and a grace from God too. So other people may have been, there's a difference too. I mean, when you're outside of the temple in the Jewish community, that was everything. That was, the family, their work, everything, I mean, there would have been a lot of, the natural excitement just because you were basically dead. I mean, your family would have thought of you as dead, or he's going to be dead. Can't see him. Think, they're out there. You can never really, they're gone. They're a leper, and so now all of a sudden they're going to be restored into the family, their temple, their work, and their community. I mean, their whole life is saved, and so instead of recognizing, and giving thanks to God, which is giving praise and thanksgiving to God, is what we're called to do first. And this one sees it, and he goes to the source. And so I think, again, he has this posture of worship, that Jesus, he recognizes that Jesus is God. And so there's going to be others, though, that are left out because they have lack of faith and thanksgiving and praise. And, God gives us gifts. We're called to give thanks to the gift giver, not the gifts. And that's a big part of it, too, is that God gives us gifts. All the things we have, are gifts from God. The fact that we're here, And we're so worried about these gifts that we're not properly giving thanks back to God who gave us all these things. And these gifts can be like a hindrance for us getting to heaven. That's why it's hard for a rich man to enter heaven, right? That's what Jesus said. And it was recognized then, and it's recognized now. And we have to see it. And it's good to look at your own self and say, do I have hindrances in my life that are, I'm putting up a barrier to becoming closer to God. And so that's something to contemplate.